Gilligan's Island was created by Sherwood Schwartz, who wanted to make a show about people from different backgrounds, like a working class guy, a millionaire, an intellectual, who were forced to get along with each other. And so that no one could leave the group, he had the idea that they'd be stranded on a desert island. The series would focus on the bumbling first mate of the SS Minnow, Gilligan. It would also focus on the skipper, who is the leader of the group. The millionaires, Thurston Howell III and his wife Lovey. The movie star Ginger Grant, the super intelligent professor, and the farm girl Mary Ann. The series did the first season in black and white and then 2 more in color, and then it was unexpectedly canceled to make room for Gunsmoke. It was the head of CBS's wife's favorite show. However, it has been in reruns more than any other show in history, including Island.Lugosi. CBS, you got some explaining to do! And it has become a beloved pop culture icon. They did 98 episodes in those 3 seasons, and here are the top 10 best ones. This is Bobby, and I'm here on Gilligan's Island. Thankfully, I was able to put 3 coconuts together and create Wi-Fi. To find out the top 10 episodes, I'm going to be interviewing the island's inhabitants, starting with the skipper. Why, hello, little buddy. The number 10 episode would be Seer, Gilligan! After eating some special sunflower seeds, Gilligan is able to read minds. The others do the same, but it leads to arguing among the group. Like many Gilligan's Island episodes, it's a silly idea, but it takes an interesting turn and goes back to the show's original concept of people from different backgrounds trying to get along. Usually they do alright, but because they can read each other's thoughts, their different perspectives come out. So the hard-working middle-class skipper thinks the professor should get off his back and go to work. Wholesome is my middle name, baby. And the professor thinks his mind is the only reason they're still alive. And the farm girl Mary Ann, who probably had a very conservative upbringing, has some very definite thoughts about the flirtatious movie star Ginger. I'm a what? I'm glad you can read my mind. I'm too much of a lady to say it. That's my favorite joke. It's funny, but reflective of what different parts of society often think of each other. While I do wish they could have gone a little deeper with that, it certainly makes for a great number 10. There's the model citizen, Dr. Boris Balenkov. Tell us, what's the number 9 episode? Number 9 would be The Friendly Physician. Hey, that's me. Our favorite scary guy, Dr. Boris Balenkov, takes the castaways to his island with the promise of being rescued. But his real plan is to use them in his experiments, where he takes the mind of one person and puts it in the body of another. This is a great spooky-themed episode. The house is scary looking with plenty of cobwebs and even a groovy torture chamber. Balenkov's experiment will lead him to conquering the world, which is always a solid mad scientist plot, and it creates some unique and great comedy moments for us. And of course, there's Vito Scotti as Dr. Boris Balenkov. Scotti was a character actor in a regular 60s television, appearing in 4 Gilligan episodes, 2 as the Japanese sailor, and 2 as this respectable chap. He's wonderfully campy as this creepy mad scientist, and he speaks in an exaggerated version of Bela Lugosi's voice. How would you like to rule the world? I could transfer the mind of one animal into the body of another, and now I could do it with people. How does that grab you? He's so funny, and it makes this episode great. Spooky fun! Now let's ask the professor. Tell us, Professor, what's the number 8 episode? Scientifically speaking, it must be Duo on a makeshift flotation device. Huh? 2 on a Raft. 2 on a Raft is actually the second version of the pilot episode. The first version, Marooned, featured different actors as the professor and Ginger, and instead of Mary Ann, there was a secretary named Bunny. In this episode, the skipper, his first mate Gilligan, and their 5 passengers wake up to discover they have been shipwrecked, and the skipper and Gilligan go out on a raft to try to get rescued. It works about as well as you can imagine. Incidentally, the opening scene was reused from the pilot episode, and you can spot some of the replaced actors on the deck of the Minnow. This episode is a great introduction to the series. We meet all the characters, get their relationships, and we get the humor of the show. However, there's also a serious adventure quality to this episode. The castaways just arrived on the island, so it's entirely unexplored. We don't know what's out there. Are there headhunters or what? Also, some of the scenes were actually filmed on location on real beaches, and it gives the island more of a sense of reality, more scope, and more mystery. What's beyond those real trees? Also, Gilligan and Skipper do take that little raft out in the middle of the ocean. They encounter bad weather and even get surrounded by sharks. Doo-doot, doo-doo-doo-doot. Gilligan, where's the shark repellent? Didn't the professor say he was gonna make some? Yeah, it was delicious. Gilligan! Okay, it's not exactly Jaws, but for Gilligan standards, I thought the sharks looked pretty good. And they give a sense of danger to the scene. While the episode is certainly played for laughs, it does show some very real perils of being lost in the sea, and makes a very exciting first episode. Now to find out the number 7 episode, let's ask the headhunter. Hunka bunka dunka! I think he's saying, pass the vegetables. Booty booty boof! Oh, pass the vegetables, please. Gilligan, who else, fishes a crate of vegetable seeds out of the lagoon. But unbeknownst to our castaways, they are radioactive, and Gilligan, Marianne, and Mrs. Howell get superpowers in accordance to the vegetables they ate. This story is crazy, but it's so enjoyable, partially because of how they make you believe it, and because of how funny it is. Part of the reason it's so easy to suspend your disbelief when watching Gilligan's Island is because of Bob Denver as Gilligan. He has this otherworldly magic quality about him, so no matter what happens, with Gilligan it seems possible. They also introduce the fantasy element slowly. So first we see the label that says the seeds are radioactive. Then they grow abnormally fast. Then they take on weird shapes. For example, the string beans look like pretzels. And by the time the castaways find out the seeds are radioactive, we are totally sucked in and expecting something wild. And the payoff is great. Gilligan, who has eaten a lot of spinach, gets super strength and begins lifting trees. And Mrs. Howell, who just loves sugar beets, gets tons of energy from the sugar. Lovey, slow down. I'm exhausted just watching you. At least take a coffee break. Those are great scenes of physical comedy. Along with those, the episode opens with Gilligan and Skipper fishing, and they keep bumping into each other. And there are a lot of great gags when they're growing the vegetables. This episode is one great slapstick scene after another. It's creative, and it makes you want to eat vegetables. Now for number 6, let's ask the millionaire, Thurston Howell III. I'd bet my bottom dollar, figuratively speaking of course, that it's with a real Mr. Howell. Please stand up. An impostor is posing as Mr. Howell on the mainland and is spending Mr. Howell's money. But Mr. Howell is determined to find some way to get on the mainland and stop this fiend. But the impostor arrives on the island. When Sherwood Schwartz created Gilligan's Island, he had only one actor in mind as the wealthy, snobbish, and silly Thurston Howell III. Me. Just kidding, Jim Backus. He actually had to double his salary in order to sign him, but it was money well spent. Jim Backus had already played a similar role, Hubert Updike III, in Alan Young's radio show. He starred in comedies, dramas like Rebel Without a Cause, where he plays James Dean's father, and was even the voice of Mr. Magoo. In terms of comedy skills, he's the most talented cast member, with his attitude, exaggerated aristocratic voice, hilarious ad-libs, and overdone facial expressions. And in this episode, he's on center stage. He has so many great things to do here. Every time he hears a radio broadcast about the imposter, he totally loses it. And he does a great job at playing the imposter as a more subtle and serious Mr. Howell. And when the two of them finally meet, it's a comedy highlight. Lovey, I'll show you he's not me. If you had to give up everything in the world, except your money or your wife, which would you keep? By George, I'm the evil Mr. Howell. My money, of course. That's Mr. Howell, all right. The plot is good, too. The castaways are visited by evil twins in 3 different episodes. And you thought global warming was a problem. But this one actually makes the most sense, because if some unscrupulous person could impersonate Mr. Howell, perhaps through plastic surgery, and have access to all his money, he would. And that bit of logic gives this episode more interest, and it makes the Mr. Howell impostor a great Gilligan's Island villain.
For number 5, let's ask Marianne.
The number 5 episode is Beauty Is As Beauty Does, or This Pie Ain't Coconut. There's a beauty contest on the island, with Ginger, Marianne, and Mrs. Howell as contestants. And with the skipper coaching Ginger, Professor coaching Marianne, and Mr. Howell coaching Mrs. Howell, Gilligan has a deciding vote. One of the great pop culture questions of all time, especially for gentlemen, is who do you like better, Ginger or Marianne? And while the real phenomenon of this question came after the series was canceled, this episode taps into it. Now, Mrs. Howell's in the contest too, and her comedy skills are always welcome. But the real thrill is seeing the two girls against each other. And the show highlights the appeal of both women. With Ginger, there's the attraction of the voluptuous movie star, who you could hit the town with, and during the contest, she sings a very sexy, "Let Me Entertain You." With Marianne, there's the attraction of the sweet girl next door, who you could take home to mom. And during the contest, she does an adorable tap dance. And Gilligan is the judge. Poor Gilligan. And he doesn't know who to vote for because he doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. On one hand, Skipper is right and Ginger should win. But on the other hand, the professor is right and Marianne should win. What a spot. Only an idiot would get himself in a spot like this. Ultimately, Gilligan plays it smart and votes for Gladys the monkey, which I love because it leaves the debate open-ended for all time. Now, don't tell Tina Louise I told you this, but most polls do tend to favor Marianne, and she did get the most fan mail on the show. Along with highlighting the Ginger and Marianne debate, this episode also does a great job at showing off all 7 cast members. Because they're broken up into teams, you get to spend quality time with each of them, and each one has something to do. Overall, it's a solid and significant chapter in the Gilligan's Island saga.
Now for number 4, let's go to Gilligan.
And the number 4 episode is How to Be a Hero.
Not that way.
The skipper saves Marianne from drowning and becomes a hero, and this makes Gilligan feel inferior, so the skipper tries to figure out a way for his little buddy to be a hero too. Meanwhile, a headhunter is on the island, and is planning to add to his collection. I adore this episode, partly because of how it shows the relationship between Skipper and Gilligan, and because of its message. Although the skipper always yells at Gilligan when he goops up, which is every second, you always know he cares about him. For that very reason, the skipper was the hardest part to cast, and only Alan Hale was able to do it. This entire episode, he's racking his brain, trying to come up with these staged scenarios, like pretending to be trapped under a tree, so that Gilligan could rescue him and think he's a hero. But naturally, Gilligan screws up every time. That is until the end, when the headhunter is about to kill the skipper. At first, Gilligan runs away. But then he gets his courage, saves the skipper, and becomes a hero. It shows the bond between the two men, that they're willing to risk their lives for each other. And it shows that anyone could become a hero, even a Gilligan. However, to keep this episode from becoming too sappy, there's also the great subplot with the headhunter.
I hope the professor gets here soon. I've got a terrible headache.
Do you have any aspirin?
No, I don't have any aspirin. What else can you do for a headache?
The headhunter gives some excitement and humor to the story, especially in the scene when Gilligan thinks the headhunter is the skipper in disguise. Overall, it's a sweet-natured and entertaining episode. Incidentally, Alan Hale was just as nice in real life, and would often visit children's hospitals in his full skipper uniform and tell the kids, "Don't worry, little buddy, the skipper's here and everything's going to be okay." And it would legitimately help with their recovery.
What's the number 3 episode, Ginger?
I'll give you a hint.
Is it a wolf?
No, the producer. Movie producer Harold Hecuba, played by Phil Silvers, lands on the island, and after he insults Ginger's acting, the castaways put on a musical production of Hamlet to show him what a great actress she is. According to Sherwood Schwartz, who received tons of letters about Gilligan's Island until he died, this is the most popular episode with fans, and with good reason. It's a ball! It's got the Gilligan's Island car, Tina Louise doing a Sophia Loren and Marilyn Monroe impression, and most of all, it's got Phil Silvers. Phil Silvers was a major comedy star, and more importantly, he was part owner of Gilligan's Island, through his company Glad to See You Productions. On screen, Silvers is an obnoxious shyster and a full of himself jerk, but he's so funny at it that you like him anyway. He promises to get the castaways rescued, as long as they cooperate, so he bosses around Gilligan, naturally, the skipper, and even the Howells. After he insults Ginger's acting, the castaways put on Hamlet the musical, and it is so much fun. The castaways play the different characters, like Gilligan plays Hamlet. I think I hear Shakespeare rolling over in his grave. The scene's a little iffy, but Tina Louise actually does a great job. However, some of the lines are actually taken directly from Hamlet, and the music is from classic operas, so the fluff has a solid foundation. And if you're showing this to kids, it's a great introduction to Hamlet. Who needs college when you have Gilligan's Island? After Harold Hecuba sees it, he decides to take over the production, and to show him how it's done, he plays all the roles himself. Hamlet, dear, your problem is clear. Avenging your father's death, you seek to harm your uncle mom, but you're scaring me to death. Hark, I do believe I hear my father Polonius. Hark, I do believe I hear my father Polonius. It becomes a short, one-man musical show starring a comedy legend. No wonder it's a fan favorite. Now for our number 2. Great Scott! Mr. Howell, what is that?
Great Scott, he must be a Yale man. Number 2 is Lovey's secret admirer.
Lovey has been receiving notes from a secret admirer, but it's revealed that they're really from Thurston, who's trying to give a woman of Lovey's years a special thrill. She's not too pleased with that comment, so the two have a fight, and Mr. Howell is thrown out. But they're brought back together when Lovey dreams that she's Cinderella and Thurston is Prince Charming. One of the famous Gilligan's Island plot devices is the dream sequence. They are fun for the cast and for the fans. They get to be in different sets, and the actors get to play different characters. Like in this one, Ginger and Marianne play the ugly stepsisters. So they get to show off their broad comedy skills in a way their characters wouldn't normally allow. However, some of the dream episodes are a little iffy, where the dream might be great, like when Gilligan plays Count Dracula. But the reality plot that it's in is on the weak side, and the dream just seems like filler. But not here. The reality plot and the dream plot are terrific, and they go together perfectly. The main plot focuses on the Howells, which is always a win. Jim Packus is hilarious at pretending to be jealous, but Natalie Schafer is also terrific as Mrs. Howell. In real life, she was very much like her character, and her chemistry with Jim Backus was so good that many fans thought they were really married. He even taught her how to ad-lib, and you could frequently see both actors trying to outdo each other. After their fight, they go into the Cinderella dream sequence. Who are you? I'm your fairy godfather. I didn't know I had a fairy godfather. Well, your fairy godmother was busy, so for tonight they let me in the union. Along with being a classic story, which gives the dream sequence a good plot, Cinderella is also pretty short, so they're able to do it in its entirety. And because it's so well known, they're able to spoof it, like by having Gilligan be the fairy godfather. After dreaming that Thurston is Prince Charming, Lovey's ready to forgive him. And when Thurston hears Lovey talking in her sleep, he goes into the hut. So the dream sequence actually advances the plot, making this a well-written and magical Gilligan's Island episode. Now for the number 1 episode, let's ask the gracious Mrs. Howell. And the number 1 episode is... yes. The number 1 episode is Water, Water Everywhere. My, what a marvelous name for a cocktail party. The water supply has run out. The castaways have to go on strict water rations until they find a new water supply. The reason this is the number 1 episode is because it's the most dramatic and believable. They're out of water and they're gonna die. The best stories are usually life and death situations. Now they've been in those before, like with the headhunters, but the headhunters look pretty silly. But in this one, the danger is real. This could actually happen if you're stranded on a desert island. So it gives the story interest and suspense, even without the comedy. If something has interfered with our water supply, this is just the beginning. First the plants will die, then the fruit trees will die, and then... This could be serious, Gilligan. Because the story is dramatic, it makes the comedy funnier, because it seems real. Like when the Howells and the girls are stealing water, it's funny, but it's something people might actually do. And when Gilligan and the skipper are putting rocks in their mouth to help quench their thirst, they make it silly, but it's a real survival technique. It also has the single best sexy Ginger scene, where Gilligan is talking to Ginger while she's taking a shower. So Gilligan and the audience assume she's naked, but when she comes out, it's revealed she was just washing her hair and she has a towel on. The final thing that I love about this episode is how the problem is solved. After Gilligan accidentally pokes a hole in the water supply, Gilligan runs away, but he sees a frog. Figures out where there's a frog, there's water, so he follows the frog to find the water. Usually when Gilligan saves the day, it's by accident, but not here. Bob Denver, who was actually a very intelligent man in real life, infuses Gilligan with this amazing childlike quality. And following a frog to find water is something only a child or a Gilligan would think of. So it shows that being a childlike goof isn't necessarily a bad thing, and it makes this the #1 episode. I hope you've enjoyed your look at the top 10 Gilligan episodes, and enjoy the rest of your winter, folks. Meanwhile, I'll be on Gilligan's Island. At least in my imagination.